I think as we get older, we find wisdom in older people. Whereas if I was to be doing this, my first act at 21 or 22, it just wouldn't seem right. It's about being able to give people a better perspective and a better sense of who they are and what they're dealing with. And in terms of death, a gentle, autonomous death.
Welcome to Your Second Act, the podcast that proves that life doesn't have to end at 40, 50, or even 60, because when it comes to living your best life, age is just a number. Hello, lovely people. Can you believe we are already halfway through the year? How is that even possible? And the other day, I was reading something and some person decided that he would let us all know that there are only 25 Fridays until Christmas. It annoys me to no end when people say that. Why do some people feel the need to give the rest of us anxiety about this one day of the year? Christmas seems to get so much attention, but it can really trigger a lot of anxiety for many people. Now, I grew up loving Christmas and I still really enjoy it, but as I get older, I find that the expectations are just too high for this one day. So my message to that person who just had to remind us that Christmas is around the corner, maybe start the countdown in November, the month leading up to Christmas, and let the rest of us just enjoy the year. Now, enough ranting and raving about that. Today's episode, ever since I can remember, the thought of death always filled me with fear. And I never understood why anyone would want to work closely with the dying until I spoke to Caroline. Death has always been a taboo subject in our culture. And when I came across Caroline's story about how she transitioned from a career in PR to working as a death doula in her second act, I was intrigued and thought I needed to hear this story. Caroline openly shares her journey to finding more meaningful work as a death doula, especially after experiencing the deaths of her own parents and realising the great need for support during the dying process. She passionately advocates for death literacy and autonomy in end-of-life decisions and finding profound fulfilment in helping others navigate grief and loss. And like myself, some of you may be wondering, what is a death doula? Well, let's get into the episode and I'll let Caroline explain exactly what it is. But before we do get into this episode, please remember to rate and review. It just helps the podcast so much. Well, let's get into it. Welcome to Caroline's second act. Hi, Caroline. I've been really looking forward to our chat today, and I'm so glad that you've come on. Because when I was scrolling through my Instagram and I came across yours and you had a post there saying that you've retrained as a death doula, I immediately thought, what is a death doula and how interesting is this? So that's why I reached out, because I thought, wow, in your second act, you've actually retrained as something completely different to your PR background. So I'm really, really interested in diving in deep as to why this has come up and what purpose it's given you in life. So welcome so much to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks. I was really honoured when you reached out, and I love what your second act is. So I'm honoured to be here today. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I can't wait to learn all about it. So I'm going to start with, what is a death doula?
Well, a death doula is also known as an end-of-life doula or an EOL doula. It's similar to a birth doula, which is an assistant. Doula is the Greek word for assistant or servant. So it's a non-medical assistant person to be with somebody during their dying time, whether that's a couple of days or a couple of weeks. The client obviously has a cognition that they've asked for the services of a death doula. And where the person isn't cognizant, often the family will engage a death doula. A death doula has many, many roles. Grief is a very powerful emotion, and the imminent death of somebody will bring about a huge amount of very strong feelings, emotions. being, number one is grief, but there's also denial. There's also this undying amount of love that a family or friends have for the person who is dying. So all in all, your brain can scatter a bit if you're the person that is being relied on in that role of being with the dying. So that's where a death doula comes in. They can take over certain responsibilities, making sure not many people are with the person who is dying, and primarily making sure that the wishes of the dying person are carried out. They can assist emotionally. They can sit with the family and the friends. They can talk externally away from the bedside or, in the hospital with relatives. They can give a better understanding of the death process. They offer solace for everyone involved. They can also be a middle person between the client or the client's family and the palliative care staff or the doctor, or in some cases, even the legal team, the lawyers. There's a lot of responsibilities and roles a doula can fill. And I suppose what it is, we are more familiar with the death doula's role now. What each death doula one by one is trying to encourage is people, particularly Western cultured people, generally speaking, we're not very good at death. So one by one, each doula is trying to get the word out around death literacy and making people more aware that they can actually be more autonomous in the way they die. We don't have to just go in an ambulance, go to hospital, get on lots of drugs and drips and machines that go bing, and then eventually die. There are different alternatives to dying depending on your wishes. Yeah.
Because I think when we first caught up, you were saying how our culture really fears death and we don't talk about it. And we know that it's inevitable, but we just think, well, it's just something that's going to happen to us. It's sad, it's horrible. So I don't want to think about it. Whereas other cultures celebrate death, don't they? And which I sometimes find it hard to wrap my head around that, because it's like, wow, you've lost somebody, but again, you are celebrating the life of somebody. But I think from what I'm hearing, a death doula is like that emotional support when, you're dealing with the death of somebody, then it's really hard. Like you said, you don't really think rationally, do you, at the time? And when you've got all this stuff to organize, how wonderful is it to have somebody by your side to guide you? And the question I wanted to ask you was, so why did you decide to become a death doula?
For a few reasons. The death of my own parents was, as a child, always my worst nightmare, particularly my mum. To lose my mother would be, in the past, the worst thing that could ever happen to me. I lost my mum in 2021. She died at home. She was dealing with a chronic illness, but at the end, it was only a couple of days, and she knew what she wanted. She said, I don't want to go to hospital again. I just want to stay at home. Can you ring the GP? And basically, I sat with her for 3 days while she gradually died. And at the time, I realized that it's a big call to call on somebody as a friend to come and be with me. Although my friend Annie came in the last sort of 12 hours and was with me, and for Angel Annie, I'll be eternally grateful. If there was somebody I knew who was a death doula at that time, I definitely would have called them to come in and guide me through my mum's death, to reassure me that what was happening to her was normal and natural, and also to reassure my mum that I was being cared for. Because one of the big things my mum was saying when she was conscious was, are you okay? Are you okay? She was saying lots of other beautiful things, but she just wanted to know that I was okay. And that's almost like an inspiration for me to know, if I could have said, yes, my support person, doula, Michelle, is with me, for example, and we would have organised Michelle to be with us before, then that would have given her something to hold on to as well, that I was being supported. My mum was very independent and very cognizant. Not everyone is like that. But that's where a end of life plan comes in as well. That if you know that you're dying, say you've been given a prognosis of 3 months, that then you can implement all sorts of plans for your death and your dying and your funeral and things like your will, your trust and things like that. So that's when a doula could come in as well and meet with clients at that point when death is inevitable and ensure that those wishes are carried out. Yeah. So that's how I became a death doula, really inspired by my mum's determination to stay at home and to be with me. My children were home at the time, but they didn't involve themselves. They knew what was going on, but they weren't involved. And I was also at the time, and still am, studying a master's of psychotherapy and counselling. So for me, it was another string to that educational bow, if you like. And then the fallout, or the subsequent weeks and months after my mother died, I really am passionate about grief and loss counselling now too, because I think there's a big gap as Westerners that we don't acknowledge too, that we think we have the death, we have the funeral, and then everyone goes back to their lives. And that's what happens. And that's how our society works. But for a lot of people who have been hit the most by the death of this person, their grief subsides, but it never goes away. So to work in that space and to help people in that space and hold them in that space and and reassure them that this is all normal. This is all normal feelings. You are not strange. You're not peculiar. It's a big, as you said, unspoken part of our life is death, and death of a loved one.
When you're dealing with the person who is passing and you're planning their last wishes, I'm assuming not everyone is happy to say, well, this is what I want. I want my funeral to have this. I mean, there would be a lot of scared people. How do you deal with someone who just doesn't even want to deal with it? Do you then just look to the family for their guidance? Because you don't want to force somebody, obviously.
No, definitely not. It's a very sensitive time for everyone involved. So you're being guided by the client, however much they want to share or tell you, you go with that. In terms of funeral planning, you can get some sort of an idea. I remember when my dad was very sick and he was actually in a hospital and died in a hospital. One of the really cheery senior doctors came in and said, okay, so I've got to do this, plan for you. Do you want to be buried or do you want to be cremated? And it was all this sort of list of X, Y, and Z. And he said, oh, well, I don't want to talk about this now. And he was in complete denial that he was not long for this earth for much longer. And he still to the moment he died, we never got that document finalised. So you've really got to work within the parameters of where the client's guiding you. And as I said, in other cases, work with the family. My mum was quite unique in that she knew what she wanted and she knew what she wanted for her funeral. But a lot of people don't want to acknowledge it.
And with the people that do they ever sit there and talk about their regrets in life or things they wish they had done? Because that'd be quite interesting. Because we all will die with some form of regret, won't we? So, I just thought, I wonder what people have said.
In my experience, it's more relational based. So not so much regrets, but people, this one particular client that comes to mind, checking in with a family member about other people. So perhaps there was a regret that this person hadn't stayed in contact with certain people that they were talking about. Yeah, I mean, in my experience, it hasn't been the big bombshell regrets. It's more, it's more, yeah, it's more gentle. And it's based on connections, human connections, and almost a sense of curiosity as well. I haven't spoken to so-and-so lately. I wonder how they're going. And it's almost like they realize it's their last opportunity to check in with other people.
And how has your perception of dying changed since becoming a death doula?
Well, as I said before, it was actually my biggest fear to lose my parents. And also as a child, I remember my biggest fear of dying. Like I was scared, so scared. And it's a very normal childhood sort of thought, like the thought of dying. For me now, having done this training and worked with people and plus studying psychotherapy and counseling, I'm a lot more at peace with it. I'm a lot more realistic about it. For years, I didn't have a will, so I've now written a will. I've put in place a document that has a lot of information in case I get hit by a bus, like passwords, people to contact, my wishes, what I'd like for a funeral, who I'd like to invite to, a wake. So I have become a lot more realistic because it's a complicated thing. If you die without doing the paperwork, and it sounds a bit black and white, and lots of people do die without having done the appropriate paperwork. So in terms of that, logistically, yeah, I'm more organized, but yeah, still, I don't want to miss out on anything.
No, and you got plenty of time.
Yeah, plenty of time. But I'm actually I have confronted my own immortality.
A few months ago, my father, who is 85 years old and touch wood, he's well. But it's interesting how now he starts to say, okay, when I pass in this folder, this is where everything is. Like he has organized it all so we won't have to worry about finding things. And you hear it time and time again where people are left with a mess. So I kind of got really upset when he said it to me, but I thought, well, no, he's actually being realistic. And my mind shift has changed because it is going to happen. And when it happens, at least I have the comfort of knowing, well, he's got his affairs in order. I know what he expects for his funeral. So I really respect that. And then speaking to you the other day, I thought it's a practical thing. It's something we don't want to face, but no one is going to get away without dying. So, it can be, some listeners might be thinking, oh my gosh, this is such a somber conversation, but it's part of aging. It's coming to terms with, the fact that it is going to happen and how do we deal with it? And just going back to the role of a death doula, I think that's an amazing role that someone plays in the whole process of your loved one dying or yourself, and knowing that, they've got that support. So, I was really impressed. So your past career obviously is completely different to what you're doing now. What purpose has this given you in life? Like, how has it changed you?
It's changed me in that I'm working with humans' emotions and humans' needs. In my previous career, I listened to clients, I told their story, and hopefully there was a financial gain at the end working in PR and marketing. So in this role, I feel like I'm doing the same sort of listening. I'm listening to people's stories, but really what I want to do is make a difference to the way they perceive themselves or the way they perceive death or the way they perceive their grief or their loss. And working in a service emotional sort of world, it feels just more right for me too. It's something that goes well with my age, my stage of life.
And your studies?
Yeah, my studies, yeah. And I think as we get older, we find wisdom in older people. Whereas if I was to be doing this, my first act at 21 or 22, it just wouldn't seem right. But I feel like this is a perfect transition as I'm getting older, my children are getting older, and to be able to give back. Whether I charge people or work for pro bono, it's about being able to give people a better perspective and a better sense of who they are and what they're dealing with. And in terms of death, a gentle, autonomous death. Yeah, it's our last time of being able to steer our own ships. So if you've got someone there supporting that and fighting for that when doctors or nurses are saying something different or they want to wheel you out in an ambulance, then you've got somebody who knows your wishes and who will make sure that those wishes are carried through.
How do you emotionally handle this?
It's sad. I mean, anything to do with death, it is sad. I'm not going to deny that. The thing that gets me through is that as I've faced my fears with my own immortality, my dear mother and father passing, to work with other people in this capacity as they die, it's a strange phenomenon that you're sad, but you can also be detached. So in psychotherapy, there's a term, love and detachment, and that is where you can love and support, but you can remain detached. And that's how I work with clients.
Well, you have to, otherwise you can't bring that all on, can you?
No, I mean, I am the sort of person that feels others. I'm a complete empath. I feel other people's pain, but I've learned to be able to contain it in a way that protects myself and the longevity of my second act and my second career. I've also got a really good supervisor and my mentor who I studied with the end of life doula work. She's fantastic. So I can debrief to her. I also make sure that I have good sort of breaks in between clients and not spread myself too thin. But it's sad. I mean, I'm not going to deny it. I'm human and I feel things. Yeah. But where there's life, there's hope.
That's right. And you must walk away with that sense of hope as well. I think it's just such a special thing you're doing. What reaction have you received from friends and family since you've decided to change careers?
Some people are fascinated, like you were when you first came across it, and they want to know more, and they go, "Wow, that's an amazing job that you've decided to retrain in." Other people don't really want to know about it, and again, I find that that's a bit of a denial of death. So yeah, it's a mixed reaction. I actually met with an elderly friend today who was very good friends with my mum, and we meet up every now and then and have a coffee and chats. And so she's been almost I don't know, I bounce a lot of ideas off her, and she's saying, "Oh, it's a great service you're offering. It's a wonderful service." But some older people aren't very open to it. And another woman I met last week, she said, I'd be very open to it, but my dad, who's 79 or 80, he wouldn't want to know about it. So, yeah, it's a mixed reaction. Yeah. But and then other people will go, well, you'd be really good at that. Like, I can see that that would be a great role for you. So, yeah, it is. It is confronting. It's a bit like when you say, I'm a funeral director or, yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
It's like, why would you want to do that? But we need someone to do all different types of jobs, and we've all got gifts to give in different roles. When you're talking about your clients, I'm assuming that they're elderly. Do you also deal with younger people?
Yeah. Well, people die at all different ages. I have only worked with aging elderly people to date. I'm open to working with anyone, although I do have to say I've got a reluctancy to work with teenagers and young adults, just because I feel like probably in the work that I've done, I still haven't acknowledged that part of me being able to do that as I'm a mother of, 3 people in that age group. I'm also particularly interested in working from a grief and loss perspective with women who or partner couples who lose babies. I feel that's a very specialized area that I'd be very open to working in. I haven't done any training in that, so it's particular sort of training, but again, it's an area that people don't really talk about. Although the awareness is building on that, yeah, it's something I'll look at in the future. Yeah, but yeah, so to date, I've worked with elderly people, and there's an acceptance in that for them that they know that they've been on this planet many, 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 many decades, and they have an acceptance of that.
Yeah, to be different with a young person, that'd be so confronting. Yeah, wow. So you've said that obviously your eyes were opened to the fact that you didn't have a lot of support when your mum passed, which then spurred you on to looking into becoming a death doula. So changing your career, let's say that hadn't have happened, do you think you would have transitioned into something different in your second act? Like when you were doing your old job, were you still feeling fulfilled or were you looking for something else?
I was definitely looking for something else. And that's when I started I enrolled in the master's to do psychotherapy and counseling. So that was already in the works. And again, my mum was around and I was actually taking time off from my full-time job to care for her because her health was worsening. And I said, "Oh, I was just looking online." And I said, "What about this? What about this?" And she said, "Just go and start that master's. You've been talking about it for a long time." So I had the time to enroll. I had a bit more perspective on where my career was at and where it was potentially going. So that's when I enrolled in it was a postgrad, which has now moved into a master's. The death doula addition, I believe I wouldn't have done unless my mother had passed away. And that was purely based on my experience of not knowing what to do.
But I think all these experiences in life lead you to open a new door, which I think, in your situation, of course, it was sad you lost your mother, but through that, you're now helping others and how much that must be giving you. And I think, yeah, that's why I'm always talking about this time in life. If there's something that you really want to do, you want to explore, just do it. There's no point in not, because what have you got to lose? And I look at a lot of people who, like yourself, have changed careers or have done something different, and they all say, thank God I did it, because if I was still doing or living the life that I used to live, I know that I would not have been a fulfilled person, that I was feeling like, well, this is it for me. I might as well just sit back and just go with the motions. And I find that that is a really, really scary way to think. And that's what inspired me to do this podcast. So speaking to people like yourself, because it's not easy to make a change. I mean, I could listen to your story and think, wow, she left, she decided that she didn't want to do that career anymore. So she decided, I'm going to go back to uni. That in itself is a massive commitment, especially if you haven't really been studying like that for a very long time and you still got a family. So just even that itself, but I can see what it's brought to your life. And it's like you've walked through that new door and you haven't looked back. Would you say that's right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the people I've met along the way through my course and through my doula training and just being able to talk about my second act with such positivity and such enthusiasm, people go, "Wow, you've really made a good decision there, haven't you?" And I go, "Yeah, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made is to reinvent myself." It's almost like it's more than metamorphosis. It's almost like a second metamorphosis, if you like. Yeah. The second butterfly. Mm.
I like that. I'm going to use that. Thank you. Well, I think this is just an amazing thing that you're doing, and I want to thank you for doing it, because it's like nurses, it's like doctors. Without them, we'd be quite lost, and the service that you're offering is amazing and it helps so many people. So I will definitely leave your link in the show notes, because I don't know. I don't know if people know what a death doula is, because I used to always think a doula's got something to do with birth. So isn't it funny? There are people that help you come into this world and there are people that help you leave. So yeah, it's such a beautiful gift to have. But thank you so much for coming in. And I always like to end my episodes with the same question. So what's something that you have now in your second act that you never thought you'd have in your first?
A true sense of what I'm doing. I don't know if that makes sense, but I rolled into university in my, late teens, early 20s. And then I rolled out of that and rolled into travel and then and I sort of rolled into working in PR and marketing. It wasn't a definite decision. Whereas this time I've gone, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick to this course. And then the death doula opportunity came along. So that's what I feel like. I'm doing this with a great sense of purpose to serve people in a really empowering, autonomous way. And that, for me, is the greatest gift I can give to others. I feel like it's got a much more of a purpose, the role I'm filling now. And it just feels so much better. Not better, it's just different. It feels really good in my heart and in my soul. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be at this stage in my life that I can commit to that my children are older, that, certain things have lined up that I can do it. So the timing has been beautiful for my second act.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. And it is. It's all about timing, isn't it? Sometimes we want to rush things, but you can't because maybe you're not in the right place to actually be open to something new. But congratulations on doing what you've done, because I am still in shock, and I think it's wonderful because I could never do something like that. And even though people say, oh, but you could, no, it takes a special person to be able to deal with the grief that we all seem to want to run away from. But I wish you all the best in your new future. And I can't wait to see, where your future takes you. So thank you so much for coming in and giving me your time.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you for creating such a wonderful platform for people to share their second acts. It's very inspiring. Love it.
Yeah, I love it. I feel like I'm such a sticky beak. I can get to ask all the questions.
Great.
Take care.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks for tuning into another episode of Your Second Act. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could rate and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to me.